Before we begin, please like this video and comment below where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. My name is Imani Carter, and this is where everything changed. I was sitting in my old Honda Civic, the heat pressing against the windows, when my phone lit up with a message I never expected. The lottery app showed a number so unreal I thought it was a glitch. $88 million. No scream, no shout. Just a silent breath that felt like my whole past finally loosened its grip. And right in that moment, before the shock could settle, my mother texted asking for $200 for Jamal's car. I stared at the two messages side by side, fortune and obligation. I deleted hers without replying. That was the moment I chose silence. That was the moment I chose myself. Even before I understood the storm that choice would bring. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I opened my Instacart app and accepted another order. Driving through the city as if my world hadn't shifted, the truth sat quietly in my chest, waiting, watching. I knew my family. I knew what they valued. And I knew a test was coming. One that would reveal everything they tried to hide behind laughter, excuses, and easy hands reaching for what wasn't theirs. I kept the secret close, protecting it like a fragile flame. Over the next days, I watched my family with new eyes, noticing every careless remark, every expectation wrapped in guilt. They believed I existed to hold their problems, to catch their mistakes, to smile through their storms. But this time was different. I wasn't the same woman they thought I was. The money didn't change me. It revealed them. And when Sunday dinner arrived, I was ready to begin the test that would expose every truth they tried to bury. I walked into that familiar house with a quiet resolve, carrying a truth none of them could imagine. The air felt heavy. Sunday dinner was always the same warm smells, loud voices, and quiet expectations that I would play my usual role. But that night, everything felt sharp. Like the edges of a glass that had finally cracked. I walked in carrying the lie I needed them to believe. Eviction. Desperation. $2,000. A simple test, yet one I already knew they would fail. Because failing me was what they did best, even when they pretended it was love. Jamal was bragging at the table. Laughter too big for a man who had never carried responsibility longer than a weekend. Ashley sat beside him, pretending elegance, while judging everything around her. My mother floated between them, pouring pride into their plates while barely looking at me. And when I finally spoke, telling them I was about to lose my home, the silence that fell was not concern, it was annoyance. As if my pain was an interruption, Jamal laughed first. A sharp, barking sound that slapped the air. Ashley smirked like she'd been waiting for me to fail. My mother sighed, the sound of a door closing, and told me not to bring drama into her house. Not one of them asked if I was scared. Not one reached for me. They just dismissed me, and in that moment the weight of every year I'd spent being their backup plan landed hard. I realized I wasn't family to them, I was a resource. And tonight, they decided I wasn't worth the cost. I stepped outside to breathe, but the air was heavier there. Jamal followed, annoyed that I had ruined the mood. I begged one last time. The final part of my test, and he told me he had real priorities. Ashley joined him, suggesting I find a boyfriend who could take care of me. Their cruelty wasn't new, but hearing it now, while I held $45 million in my pocket, made their greed shine brighter than ever. I knew then the test was over. I drove away from that house, with my hands trembling, not from fear, but from a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. The streetlights blurred past as I tried to steady my breathing, realizing that the people I had spent my whole life protecting would never once choose to protect me. Their reactions replayed in my mind like a cruel chorus: Jamal's laughter, Ashley's smirk, my mother's cold sigh. It wasn't the money they lacked. It was the will. Even $2,000, split between 3 adults, was too much compassion for them to offer. That truth hit harder than any insult they had ever thrown my way. I parked outside a small apartment building in the West End, a place that smelled like old quilts and fresh cornbread. Harmony Senior Lofts. Miss Evelyn lived there, Big Mama's closest friend, a woman who had known me since childhood and loved me without conditions or calculations. When she opened the door, her eyes softened before I spoke a single word, and that alone cracked something open inside me. I sat at her kitchen table and finally let the truth spill out. The lie I told. The test. The coldness I'd faced. The silence I chose instead of celebration when I won the lottery. Miss Evelyn listened the way only real family can. Present, without judgment. Without trying to fix me. And when I finished, she stood up, walked to her room, and returned with a wrinkled envelope. Inside was $650, her rent money. She set it on the table and told me to take it. I froze. She had so little, yet she offered everything. Money comes and goes, baby, she said softly. But dignity? You don't ever let nobody take that from you. Her words settled deep. I left Miss Evelyn's apartment with her words echoing in my mind, wrapping themselves around the pieces of me that had been shattered only hours before. The night felt different now, calmer, as if the world had paused just long enough for me to breathe. I sat in my car and looked at the envelope she had given me, $650 she couldn't afford to lose, and that single act of kindness made something inside me settle with absolute certainty. I knew what I needed to do next, and I knew it would change everything. The next morning, I called Mr. Washington, the lawyer who handled my winnings. His voice was steady, sharp, and already thinking 10 steps ahead, the way good lawyers do. When I told him the truth that my family had tried to coerce me into signing away my part of Big Mama's house, that they had pressured, manipulated, and planned to cut me out, he didn't react with shock. He reacted with strategy. He said words like fraud, coercion, civil liability, and recordings, all with a calm that soothed the fire rising in my chest. We met in his office an hour later. The view from the 40th floor spread across the city, but I wasn't there to admire it. I was there to prepare. Together, we reviewed everything I had messed. Conversations, the notarized documents Ashley had pushed across the table, and the audio I had recorded that day. Every piece fit perfectly into the story they had written. With their own greed, Mr. Washington said we had enough to bury them legally. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted justice. I wanted the truth recorded somewhere they couldn't twist it. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Mr. Washington leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. They think you're vulnerable, he said. That makes them reckless. Recklessness creates evidence. His confidence wasn't loud. It was controlled, sharp, professional, and it steadied me more than I expected. We crafted a plan together, clean, legal, undeniable. I would call them. I would play the role they believed I was, desperate, scared, naive. They would walk straight into their own trap, without ever realizing the door had already closed behind them. When I left his office, the world outside seemed brighter but colder at the same time. People walked past me, unaware that entire futures were shifting quietly in the background. My phone felt heavier in my hand as I scrolled to Jamal's contact. For a moment, I hesitated, not because I doubted myself, but because this was the last time I'd ever beg for anything from them. I let the silence settle inside me, then pressed the call button. His voice was irritated, sharp, already annoyed that I dared disturb his perfect little world. I made my voice small, shaking, pretending the fear they believed I lived in every day. I told him I had read the papers, pretended I didn't understand them, pretended I was terrified I'd signed something I shouldn't have. The hook was instant. I heard the change in his tone, the slick, fake sympathy sliding in. He told me to calm down, told me everything was fine. told me I just needed to show up and sign the real papers. In the background, Ashley laughed, loud and triumphant, already certain I was trapped. I apologized, told them I wanted to fix everything. Told them my lawyer insisted we meet in person. Not my real lawyer, the imaginary one they thought would be incompetent. They agreed instantly, too eager to collect what they believed was theirs. When I ended the call, the mask finally slid off my face. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of any of them. The next morning arrived with a quiet heaviness, the kind that settles in the air before a storm breaks open. I woke before sunrise, not because of nerves, but because clarity has a way of pulling you upright long before alarm clocks do. I dressed carefully, nothing dramatic. Just enough to remind myself that I no longer belonged to the version of me they used to walk over. A clean suit, polished shoes, hair pulled back smooth and tight. The woman in the mirror wasn't scared. She wasn't small. She was prepared. When I reached the building, the 40th floor was silent. Calm, powerful. Mr. Washington was already there, arranging documents into exact positions. The kind of precision that makes people nervous before they even understand why. He didn't ask if I was ready. He just nodded once, like he already knew the answer. I sat down across from him, hands folded, breath steady. Then the elevator dinged. Their voices arrived before they did. Jamal, complaining loudly about parking. Ashley hissing at him to act normal, and my mother telling them both to behave. When the conference room door opened, all three froze. The room, the view, the polished table, none of it matched the world they thought I lived in. And I wasn't the woman they expected either. Jamal blinked fast, confused. Ashley frowned, trying to find something to insult. My mother's eyes narrowed, studying everything, searching for control she no longer had. No one spoke at first. Their footsteps echoed too loudly on the expensive tile. They sat across from me, trying to look comfortable in chairs that swallowed them whole. I stayed silent, letting the weight of the room settle on their shoulders. They hated silence because silence revealed the truth. They shifted, glanced at each other, then finally at me. I didn't flinch. Mr. Washington opened a folder, his voice calm and professional. "Thank you for coming. We have a few matters to review." And just like that, the storm began. The room tightened the moment Mr. Washington spoke, his calm tone slicing cleaner than any shout ever could. Jamal shifted in his seat, trying to look relaxed, but the fake confidence kept slipping from his face. Ashley crossed her arms like a shield, her leg bouncing under the table, and my mother pressed her lips together so tightly, the color drained from them. None of them knew what was coming. But instinct was whispering that whatever this meeting was, it wasn't going to go their way. Mr. Washington continued smoothly. "Ms. Carter has concerns about the documents presented to her. Before we proceed, we need clarity." Ashley let out a loud scoff, already annoyed. "Oh, please," she snapped. "This is simple." She signed. She agreed. "We're here so she can finish what she started. There's nothing to clarify." Her voice echoed too sharply against the glass walls, but Mr. Washington didn't react. Instead, he reached toward the small device in the center of the table, the one no one had noticed. "Excellent," he said. "Then we'll review the agreement." He pressed a single button, and then the room filled with Ashley's own voice. Her words poured out clearly, dripping with impatience and greed. "You sign the damn paper. We give you the 20 grand for the house. Now sign it. We have lunch reservations in Buckhead." The recording echoed through the conference room like a hammer striking stone. Every syllable landed hard. Jamal stopped breathing. Ashley's mouth slowly opened, her eyes widening in horror. My mother stared straight ahead, like she was trying to pretend she wasn't in the room at all. The silence afterward was so sharp it felt like glass underfoot. Mr. Washington folded his hands. "As you can hear, there are multiple issues. False representation, coercion, a fabricated loan agreement, and an attempt to deprive my client of a significant inheritance. He looked directly at Jamal. This is fraud. The word hung in the air like thunder. The word fraud didn't just echo, it cracked something open in the room. Jamal jerked forward in his seat, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Hold on now, he stammered, forcing a weak laugh that fooled no one. It's not like that. We were just trying to help her. She was desperate. She needed money. We were doing the responsible thing. Mr. Washington didn't blink. By tricking her into signing away a property worth over $600,000. By disguising a theft as a loan. By coercing her under false financial pressure. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. His calmness was the blade. Jamal swallowed hard. He had no answer. Ashley, however, exploded. She shoved her chair back, palms flat on the table. You can't do this, she screamed. She signed. She begged us for help. She wanted the money. She agreed. Her voice cracked with the kind of panic that comes only when someone realizes they've played a game they can't win. And who even are you? She demanded, pointing at Mr. Washington. Some fancy lawyer she rented for the day. He didn't turn toward her. He just continued organizing documents, as if her meltdown were background noise. My mother finally spoke, her voice low, trembling, unfamiliar. Imani, she whispered. What? What is all this? Why are you doing this? We're family. That word used to cut me. Now it barely reached me. I met her eyes. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't steal from each other. My voice was calm. Too calm. It made her flinch. Mr. Washington slid 2 folders across the table. Here are the options, he said. Option 1. Criminal prosecution. You will both face federal charges. Ashley's face drained of color. Jamal froze, mouth open. My mother clasped her shaking hands. Option 2, he continued, a civil resolution. You sign over your 2/3 of the property to Ms. Carter, today, for the same price you intended to pay. Hurt $20,000. Silence collapsed around them, like a falling wall. Their own greed had written their fate. The silence after Mr. Washington's words was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. Jamal looked like he had been dropped from a rooftop, eyes wide. Mouth open, body frozen in disbelief. 20,000. He echoed, his voice cracking. For *R* shares. Are you crazy? His panic was raw, almost childlike. The kind that appears only when someone realizes the trap they built is now closing on them. Ashley whipped toward him, furious. Do something, she hissed. Tell him no. Tell him we're not signing anything. But Jamal couldn't even turn his head. His gaze stayed locked on the papers in front of him. The very agreements, designed to steal from me now, twisted into the noose tightening around his own neck. My mother clutched her purse like it was the last lifeline she had. You can't do this, Imani, she whispered, her voice breaking. We're family. This house that belongs to all of us. Your grandmother left it to us equally. I met her gaze without blinking. Yes, I said softly. And you tried to cheat me out of my part. You tried to erase me. Ashley slammed her hands on the table again. This is a scam, she screamed. You set us up. You planned this. You, Mr. Washington lifted a hand, silencing her instantly. No, he said calmly. You set yourselves up. You drafted fraudulent documents. You attempted coercion. You made threats. You left a trail of evidence. He tapped the speaker device gently. We simply pressed play. Ashley sank back into her seat, trembling with fury she couldn't swallow. Jamal looked at my mother, begging for a miracle. But she had nothing, not even excuses. If you choose prosecution, Mr. Washington continued, I guarantee the DA's office will pursue federal charges. You will likely face prison time. Both of you. Jamal finally broke. Okay. Okay, we'll sin, he choked out, his voice small, defeated. My mother followed with a shaking nod. Ashley stared at them like they had betrayed her, but they had nowhere left to run. The papers were placed before them. The pens were handed over. They signed their names with trembling hands. In less than a minute, the house they tried to steal was mine completely. The moment the last signature hit the page, the room changed. The tension didn't disappear, it shifted, settling onto the shoulders of the people who had come, expecting to win. Jamal dropped the pen like it burned him. My mother leaned back, staring at nothing, her face strained and hollow. Ashley simply froze, her jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched in her cheek. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. Maybe this was who they truly were without the lies, without the control, without the illusion of power. Mr. Washington collected the signed documents with careful, deliberate movements. Each paper snapped lightly as he aligned them, sealing the end of a chapter they thought they controlled. "This concludes our business," he said, standing. His voice was final, sharp, cold. He didn't need to raise it. Authority carried itself. Jamal lunged forward suddenly. "Imani, please," he begged, voice cracking. We didn't mean it like that. We were stressed. We didn't think you'd take it this far." His words spilled out fast, desperate, the fear finally breaking him open. I didn't move. I didn't soften. I simply looked at him the way he had looked at me on that porch, inconvenienced, already done. Ashley shot to her feet. "You're evil," she shouted, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "You think you won. You think money makes you better than us. You'll end up alone with nothing but that stupid house." Her voice cracked in the middle, turning the last words into a shrill whine. I didn't answer. Her rage couldn't touch me anymore. My mother stood slowly, clutching her purse like a life vest. "You'll regret this," she murmured, but there was no conviction behind it. No fire, just the leftover scraps of a woman who realized too late that she had gambled away the wrong child. The security guard opened the door. One by one, they walked out, broken, angry, defeated. No apologies. No remorse. Only the bitterness of people who lost a game they created. When the door closed, the room felt peaceful again. Mr. Washington turned to me, nodded once, and said quietly, "You handled yourself perfectly." When they left the conference room, the silence that settled behind them wasn't empty, it was clean, clear, like the air after a storm. Washes away everything rotten. I finally allowed myself a slow breath. The kind you don't realize you've been holding for years. Mr. Washington gave me a respectful nod before gathering his files, his associates already closing folders and slipping them into sleek leather cases. "This is the kind of outcome most clients only dream of," he said. "You not only protected yourself, you reclaimed what was yours." I stood up, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, but not the way it used to feel. This weight didn't crush, it anchored. For the first time in my life, I felt rooted, solid, a person who belonged somewhere. I walked toward the giant windows overlooking Atlanta. The city stretched miles and miles into the horizon, full of noise, ambition, mistakes, and miracles. It didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt big enough for me. My phone buzzed in my hand. For a moment, I thought it might be them again, rage-filled texts, guilt trips, manipulations. Instead, it was a message from Miss Evelyn. A simple one. "Thinking of you, baby. Eat something today." I smiled before I even realized it. That single sentence warmed a place inside me my family had iced over years ago. When I left the building, the sun hit my face. I walked to my car without rushing, without shrinking, without bracing myself for impact. No one was waiting to demand anything. No one was calling my name with hunger behind it. For once, I wasn't the backup plan, the safety net, the unpaid lifeline. I was just me. But before I drove anywhere, I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the papers in my bag. Big Mama's house was mine. Fully, legally, permanently, not because they gave it to me but because they lost it trying to steal it. I whispered into the quiet car, "I'm taking it home. Big Mama, I promise you, I'll do right by it." I drove straight to Vine City that afternoon, letting the familiar roads guide me like muscle memory. The neighborhood had changed to new sidewalks, new cafes, new condos rising like bright teeth, but Big Mama's house still stood exactly where it always had, weathered, quiet, proud. The porch sagged. The paint peeled. The windows were dark. But the moment I stepped out of the car, I felt something warm settle over me. Like Big Mama herself was standing in the doorway with her apron on, hands on her hips, saying, "Well, child, you finally came home." I walked up the path slowly, fingertips brushing the old railings. Every creak, every splintered board held a memory. Shelling pecans with Miss Evelyn, sitting on the porch swing during summer storms, listening to Big Mama hum gospel while watering her plants. For years I'd avoided this place, too busy working, surviving, giving, struggling. Too busy being everything for everyone except myself. I stood on the porch and closed my eyes. "I'm here," I whispered, "and I'm not running anymore." The wind shifted gently, brushing past my face. It felt like an answer. A construction crew was scheduled to arrive the next morning. Mr. Washington had already secured the permits. Before I even left his office, I didn't want the house stripped of its soul. I wanted it restored, reborn, strengthened, a place meant to heal instead of hide. A place where girls who had been overlooked, dismissed, or used could walk in and finally breathe again. I unlocked the door for the first time in years. The hinges groaned, but the smell inside was familiar: dust, old wood, a hint of lavender that never seemed to fade. Sunlight pushed through the cracks, landing on the worn floorboards like it remembered them too. I walked room to room, touching walls, tracing corners, imagining what it could become: a shelter, a classroom, a safe haven, a home, not just for me, but for others like me. I placed my hand on the kitchen counter and said softly, "We're starting over, Big Mama." The next weeks moved quickly, almost like the universe had been waiting for me to finally take one step so it could push the rest into motion. The construction crew arrived early every morning, their trucks lining the street as hammers, drills, and voices filled the air. Neighbors peeked out from porches, curious about the work being done on the old Carter house. Some nodded, some smiled, a few whispered, but no one knew the truth, not yet. I visited the house every day, watching it transform piece by piece. New windows went in, bright and strong. The porch was rebuilt with thick beams that didn't wobble underfoot. They reinforced the foundation, sanded the floors, opened the walls to bring in more light. Every improvement felt like peeling away years of pain, revealing something sturdy beneath, something worth saving, something worth sharing. Miss Evelyn came by often, bringing cornbread wrapped in foil, shaking her head at the workers like they were her grandsons. "Put that board straight," she'd say. Big Mama didn't raise crooked anything. They always listened. Even the tough ones softened around her. She had that effect, gentle but like roots holding the earth together. Sometimes I stood beside her on the sidewalk, watching the progress. She'd slip her hand into mine and whisper, "She'd be proud of you." And each time, those words landed exactly where they needed to. I wasn't building a house. I was building a promise, a continuation of the love Big Mama had poured into everyone who crossed her doorstep. In the evenings, I sat with blueprints spread across my dining table, room layouts, schedules, funding plans, furniture lists. It was work, but it felt nothing like the work I'd broken myself doing before. This work fed me, filled me, shaped me. I wasn't just rebuilding a home. I was rebuilding myself. And the more the house changed, the more I realized I was creating a place where no girl would ever stand alone the way I had. The transformation of Big Mama's house wasn't just happening on the outside. Inside, every wall seemed to breathe differently as the renovation progressed. Fresh paint brightened the rooms, new wiring hummed with steady power, and polished floors reflected the sunlight pouring through the bigger, clearer windows. Even the air felt different, lighter, warmer, like the house itself was waking up after a long sleep. Each day I walked through the doorway, I felt the same things stirring in me. Miss Evelyn started visiting almost daily. She brought sweet tea, peach cobbler, and occasional scoldings for workers who didn't follow instructions. "Put that ladder down slow," she'd warn, tapping her cane. "This house is sacred. Treat it right." The workers smiled, listened, and corrected themselves. No one argued with her. She had the authority of someone who had lived through storms and refused to be blown away. One afternoon, while the crew installed new cabinets, she sat beside me on the porch, swinging a new one we had installed just for her. "You doing all right, child?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, but she gave me a look that saw straight through me. "Your heart feels heavy," she said. "Not broken, just shifting." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the fresh paint on the porch railings and said quietly, "I guess I'm learning what peace feels like." She squeezed my hand. "That's because you're finally choosing yourself," she whispered. "Takes courage to do that, especially when your own people taught you the opposite." Her words sank deep, steady and true. Later that evening, after she left, I walked room to room again. The living room felt like a gathering place. The bedrooms felt like safety. The kitchen felt like warmth. I imagined the laughter of girls who needed a home. I imagined teaching them everything I had learned the hard way about money, strength, dignity. This wasn't charity. It was inheritance, a legacy. A circle finally closing. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just fixing a house. I was building a refuge I wished I'd once had. The day the house was finally finished felt unreal, like stepping into a memory that had been rewritten with light. The last of the construction dust was swept away, the tools packed into trucks, and the fresh scent of new wood filled every hallway. I stood on the porch, staring at the home Big Mama had poured her life into, now restored, renewed, and ready to begin again. The sun hit the new white trim just right, making the whole place glow. It didn't look expensive. It looked loved. Inside, everything was exactly how I envisioned it. The living room had soft couches and warm lamps. The kitchen felt like a place where healing conversations would happen over late-night meals. The bedrooms were cozy, each one prepared for the young women who would eventually call this place a safe stop in their journey. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it was sturdy, just like the women who would walk through its doors. Miss Evelyn arrived that afternoon, carrying a bag of fresh biscuits like she was christening the place. When she stepped inside, she froze, her eyes filling instantly. "Oh, child," she whispered, touching the wall like greeting an old friend. "You brought her back." I swallowed hard, because hearing those words out loud made everything real in a way blueprints never could. We sat together at the new kitchen table. She talked about Big Mama stories I had never heard. Stories that made the walls feel fuller, warmer. She told me how Big Mama always wanted this house to help people. How she believed a home wasn't worth anything if it didn't shelter someone who needed it. "You're just continuing what she started," Miss Evelyn said. "You're the answer to a prayer she never stopped praying." Her words hit me like a soft wave. A quiet truth. A blessing. I realized then that this house wasn't just a project, it was a promise. A promise to myself, to every girl who felt alone, and to the woman who built the foundation I now stood on. I looked around the finished home and whispered, "We did it, Big Mama." The first night I spent inside, Big Mama's newly restored house felt strange in the most beautiful way. The silence wasn't empty like the apartment I had struggled in for years. It was soft, warm, almost protective. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, feeling the energy of a place that had been rebuilt, not from money, but from intention. Every corner held a memory, but now it also held possibility. I wasn't haunted here, I was held. I settled onto the couch in the living room, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, and listened to the quiet hum of the house. Outside, the streetlights glowed softly. I imagined the young women who would one day walk through that front door, nervous at first, then slowly letting themselves breathe. Girls who had been overlooked, mistreated, or made to believe their voices didn't matter. Girls like me. Girls Big Mama would have hugged before asking if they had eaten yet. I opened my laptop and pulled up the outline for the program I wanted to build. Not a shelter, not a temporary fix. A home, a starting point. A place to rebuild. The Big Mama and Evelyn House for Girls became the working name because without Miss Evelyn, I never would have found the strength to stand up for myself. I could already see her shaking her head shyly if I told her. But she deserved the honor more than anyone. Late into the night, I wrote curriculum plans, emergency support contacts, therapy partnerships, financial literacy workshops, job training, confidence building, health, education. I wrote until the cursor blurred, until my heart felt full and steady. I wasn't creating a charity. I was creating the home I had needed when everyone around me took more than they ever gave. Around midnight, Miss Evelyn called, "You home safe?" she asked, her voice warm and familiar. I smiled into the phone. "Yes, ma'am," I whispered. "Home." She hummed a soft approval. "Your Big Mama smiling tonight. I can feel it," and I believed her. After the call ended, I stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool against my skin. And for the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something to fear or survive. It felt like something I was finally allowed to shape. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the money, not to the house, but to the version of myself who had finally stopped shrinking, who had finally stood up, who had finally chosen peace over blood that never acted like family. And in that quiet moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next week arrived with a sense of momentum I hadn't felt in years. Every day, someone new reached out, women who had heard from Miss Evelyn, former teachers, church members, social workers, even a retired judge who had known Big Mama for decades. Each message carried the same tone. "If you're building something for these girls, I want to help." It felt like the universe was gathering every good soul it could find and delivering them right to the front porch. I spent most mornings interviewing volunteers in the living room. Some of them cried when they walked inside, remembering Big Mama's kindness from years ago. Others smiled softly, saying the house felt right, like a place meant to hold healing. The more they spoke, the clearer the mission became. This wasn't charity. It wasn't a business venture. It was a village being rebuilt, one conversation at a time. One afternoon, while reviewing intake procedures with a counselor named Ms. Harper, I heard footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, a teenage girl stood there. She couldn't have been older than 15. Her backpack was torn, her hoodie too thin for the weather, and her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that adults often miss because they're too busy judging. She cleared her throat and said, Is this the place that helps girls? Miss Evelyn told me to come." My heart clenched. She wasn't even inside yet, and already I knew she was exactly the kind of girl this house was meant for. I welcomed her in gently, guiding her to the couch. She sat with her hands clasped tightly, looking around the room like it might disappear if she blinked. "You're safe here," I told her. "No one's going to hurt you. No one's going to judge you." Slowly, her shoulders dropped, just enough to show she believed me. with Ms. Harper beside me. We listened as she explained her situation, arguments at home, nowhere to stay, some nights, adults who made promises and broke them just as fast. She didn't want money. She didn't want pity. She just wanted stability, a place where she didn't have to keep proving her worth. When we finished talking, I handed her a warm blanket and a hot meal Miss Evelyn had dropped off earlier. As she ate, I felt something settle deep inside me, confirmation that every step, every painful moment, every betrayal had led me here. After she left, Ms. Harper turned to me and said, "This house will save more lives than you realize." Her words echoed through the hallway long after she was gone. I looked around at the home that had been rebuilt from brokenness and whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." The next few days moved like a river, steady, purposeful, carrying new faces and new stories through the doors of Big Mama's house. Word spread faster than I expected. A pastor called asking if he could send 2 young women who had aged out of foster care. A school counselor reached out about a student who kept falling asleep in class because she didn't have a safe place to stay at night. Even a local nurse emailed me, saying she wanted to volunteer on weekends because she felt something special was happening here. Every message strengthened my belief that this home was needed far more than I realized. It wasn't just a project anymore, it was becoming a lifeline for girls the world often ignored. Miss Evelyn came over one morning with a folder of recipes and a stern announcement. "We feeding these girls right. Trauma don't heal on an empty stomach." She moved through the kitchen like she owned it, directing volunteers, organizing food shelves, setting rules. No excessive sugar, fresh vegetables, meals made with care, not just convenience. Watching her brought me a kind of comfort I hadn't felt since childhood. In the afternoon, a girl named Lonnie arrived, 17, quiet, with a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She hesitated at the doorway until I stepped outside and offered her my hand. "You're not alone anymore," I said gently. She didn't take my hand, but she nodded. And that small gesture told me more than words could. We sat at the dining table where she explained she'd been sleeping on friends' couches for months. Her mother struggled with addiction. Her father was gone. She wanted to finish school, but life kept knocking her down faster than she could stand up. When she finished speaking, she looked at me with a kind of fragile hope. "Can I stay here? Just for a while?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "As long as you need." Her relief was so immediate, it broke something open inside me. She cried silently, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. I placed a hand over hers, not pushing, just steady. It was the kind of touch I wished someone had given me when I needed it. When Lonnie went to see her room, Miss Evelyn whispered, "This house is already doing what it was meant to." That evening, as I locked the front door, I paused on the porch. The air felt different, heavier with responsibility, but lighter with purpose. I watched the windows glow softly from inside, and thought about all the girls still out there, waiting for a place like this. And for the first time in my life, I felt ready for them. The official opening day arrived sooner than I expected. The house was spotless, warm, and filled with small touches that made it feel lived in. Fresh flowers on the table, quilts folded at the ends of beds, welcome baskets Miss Evelyn insisted on putting together herself. Each basket had the same items: a journal, a soft blanket, a toothbrush, a small devotional, and a handwritten note that simply said, "You matter." She wrote every one of them by hand, her cursive looping gently across the page. Volunteers arrived early, buzzing with excitement and nerves. Ms. Harper brought binders for intake procedures. The retired nurse carried medical supplies. 2 teachers brought stacks of books and tutoring materials. Even the retired judge stepped through the front door with a smile, saying, "If these girls ever need an advocate, you call me first." I didn't realize, until that moment, how many people cared about helping young women rise. By noon, The first group of girls gathered in the living room, 6 in total. Each one carried a different story in her eyes. One stared at the floor. Another clutched her backpack like a shield. Another sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, ready to run if the world turned against her again. I felt their fear. I understood their hesitation. I had lived it. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Welcome to the Big Mama and Evelyn house," I said softly. "You are safe here. You are wanted here. And you don't have to be anyone but yourself." The room stayed quiet. But something subtle shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Breaths softened. Eyes lifted. Miss Evelyn nodded proudly from her chair in the corner. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing in small bursts, sharing pieces of our lives. The walls that once held sorrow now held possibility. The kitchen filled with the smell of Miss Evelyn's greens and cornbread. The girls ate like they hadn't felt full in months. No one rushed. No one raised their voice. No one demanded perfection. Later that evening, after everyone settled in their rooms, I stepped outside onto the porch alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep orange and rose gold. I thought about everything that had led me here, at the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silence, the test that revealed everything I needed to know. My family had walked away, but in their place, something greater had walked in. A village, a purpose, a legacy. As the porch light flickered on, I whispered into the twilight, "We did it, Big Mama. We really did." And for the first time, I felt the weight of my past finally loosen its grip, replaced by something stronger. Hope for every girl who would walk through that door after me. Months passed, and the house, settled into its purpose like it had been waiting for this moment all along. The girls grew, healed, learned, and rebuilt themselves in ways that felt almost sacred. Lonnie began tutoring younger students. The 15-year-old who first knocked on the door was now smiling more than she flinched. 2 others found part-time jobs and started saving for their own apartments. Their victories were small to the world, but to us, they were entire universes shifting. I found myself changing too. The weight I'd carried for years, fear, guilt, obligation, began to lift. I no longer woke up bracing for someone's demand. My phone didn't ring with emergencies that weren't mine to fix. The silence was peaceful now, not empty. I finally understood how much space pain had taken up inside me, and how much room purpose created in its place. My old family never reached out again, not with apologies, not with accountability. Occasionally I'd hear from a distant cousin that Jamal and Ashley were still bitter, still blaming everyone but themselves. My mother moved out of the city. I grieved the relationship I wished I'd had, not the one I lost. But something Miss Evelyn told me kept repeating. Some people are chapters, baby, not the whole book. And finally, I believed her. One evening, after the girls finished dinner and drifted off to their rooms, I stood alone in the living room. The warm lights, the soft quilts, the quiet laughter echoing faintly down the hall, it all washed over me like a blessing. This house wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about transformation, turning pain into purpose, silence into strength, abandonment into belonging. I walked to the front porch, opened the door, and stepped outside. The night air was cool and steady, humming with the soft sounds of the neighborhood. I looked back at the glowing windows, thinking of Big Mama, thinking of the scared version of myself, who once sat in a car holding a winning lottery ticket and crying alone. She had no idea that everything she lost would one day lead to everything she was meant to build. I placed my hand on the porch railing and whispered into the quiet, "I'm home." Then I turned to the camera, the world, watching this story, and said, "If this touched you, please like this video. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And remember, family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up for you when the world goes dark. Choose your people. Choose yourself. You deserve a life that feels like home."